If we could just find a way to beat Detroit, we could win it. And this year, it's looking hard, And I don't know. I mean, do you guys ever remember just such a stacked American League for the month of October? Like literally anybody can win it this year or go to the World Series.
It's like the West in the NBA, except you would have to condense it down to like 4 teams.
Yeah,
it's wild. I've never seen it this stacked, but I think it will play out like a 04, 07, 13 type of run regardless, because teams going to be knocking out each other before we even play them. It'll just be in reverse order. Instead of playing the Yankees in the ALCS or Detroit in the ALCS, you get them in the DS. Well, you might get the quote-unquote weaker team in the ALCS this year. You might get Houston, Cleveland, or the Mariners or something wild in the ALCS versus you're going to get the Yankees in the ALDS.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I think we're getting the Yankees no matter what right away.
Unless they somehow screw up the wild card game, which I've talked about on other podcasts before with Chris Saunders because he's the Yankee guy. But that ballpark plays so poorly for pitchers because it's just a home run heaven that something like that happened last year with the Twins where all of a sudden they're down 3-0 in the first.
Turned into a slugfest.
If they play Seattle and Seattle's pitching the way they've been pitching this year and they score 5 in 2 innings against Severino, I don't know if they made the mistake that Minnesota did last year and start choking games away.
It's a good point, but Severino is a lot better, and he's got a lot more.
Of course, he was my vote for the Cy Young, probably 2-3 weeks ago. But now I think it's got to be Sale. If the season ended today, of course, Sale could still do what he did last year and slip up, and somebody could go and slip right back in there. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point because I don't think they let him pitch after the 6th inning today, and I like that because Farrell leaves him in if he's still here. And
he's a stat whore.
Yeah, he was a pitcher. That's why he's a pitcher's guy. He's a pitching coach, and Sale went 101 pitches in 6 innings on the dot today. But they had, I think it was Henry warming up in the pen during his last batter. So I'm pretty certain that Cora was taking him out regardless if he got that guy out or not, which I do love. I love that fact that he can go out there and do that. And, Sale knows it's coming. So he reeled back. He threw like 96 or 97 during that at bat. So he knew he was coming out, which I also like because he just kind of left it out there and then was happy to leave.
Yeah, and just another thing. I mean, I was just saying Farrell would leave him in, but I think there were certain elements last year where Sale kind of forced his way to stay in. And Farrell just kind of accommodated it at times because that strikeout record, like that was in September, like when he needed to be resting at that point. And I think Farrell was afraid to take him out at that point, but so I just think that speaks to maybe Alex Cora, communicating this with them early on, saying, look. We're not going to chase stupid records this year. And
no, he probably walked into this World Series ring and just sat it down in front of the boys.
Yeah, that could have been.
Yeah.
That absolutely could have been.
What you get, listen.
This works. It's basically what you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
I've done this before. You guys remember?
Yeah, I just think there's a clear message and I think Sale himself might have looked back at last year and thought, maybe I should have taken it easy. And because he's got his own free agency case coming up, and if he keeps blowing up the last couple of months, then what kind of a contract does he get at that point?
He would still get $30 million a year just from a bad team versus a good team.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be a lot of years. It might be a 5-year deal at that point. But
his value is they're comparing him. So obviously these names aren't going to surprise you: Greinke, Kershaw, Scherzer, and Lester. Those that they're comparing him to. What his contract's going to kind of be like: 7-8 years, 240 to 250 million, around 30 million a year, give or take. And when all those guys were signed. He's going to be 30 when he signs his new contract, or about to be 30, whatever it may be. Greinke signed when he was 32. Kershaw 25, which was a steal, and then Scherzer and Lester at 30 each. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get anywhere from 6 to 8 years. Even with the Red Sox, I wouldn't be surprised if the Red Sox gave him 8 years till he's 38 and kind of figure it out later type of deal.
I don't.
Well, it's going to be more than all those guys, obviously, just because of the nature of the beast. I mean, baseball contracts always seem to increase in value per year and everything else. But, I mean, doesn't he deserve it?
Oh, 100% he deserves it. I'd be scared to do 8 years. I'd rather do 6. I think 6 would be amazing.
Especially with that velo. Like, you never know what's going to happen to a shoulder or an elbow.
Yeah, exactly. And just in general, when you got players like Devers and Benintendi due up in 5 years for UFA, but that's 5 years from now, and he'd still be in the books for $30 million for another 3 years if we sign him to his 38. So to put that
Plus, we can look at past mistakes.
Yes, of course, on our team and others.
Yep.
He'll actually be. His birthday's on March 30th, so he'll be 31 at the start of his new contract, basically.
Yeah, his UFA year.
So, I mean, I'd be really uncomfortable going more than 6 years. I'll give him the high annual,
Yeah,
30 to 32 maybe, but I wouldn't want to go beyond a 6 year. And people have said, his delivery is kind of nasty. It's really violent on his elbow, and I don't worry about it so much with him because I feel like he's smart enough to kind of adapt and evolve, much like Sabathia has. Sabathia took forever to really figure it out, though. I mean, there were 3 or 4 bad years in a row there before last year when he, started to be a more dominant off-speed guy. But
yeah, the booze had something to do with that as well, for CC's sake.
Could be. I mean, he had to go to rehab right before the wild card game in 2015 for alcohol too. So,
yep. And those were the years it wasn't too great. So,
yeah,
it was interesting with that. But I agree. I think Sale, it is a violent motion, but I don't think he's dumb enough to just go out there and try and throw 100 until it falls off and retires. So,
yeah,
I think he'll adapt and he'll want to stay in the game for a while. He's a gamer. He wants to win. He likes to pitch. So,
yeah,
I'm good with that. And so be it with that. I think the contract will figure it out. Like, for all our players, I don't think we're losing out on anybody except for Kimbrel. He's the one that probably walks.
And his stuff's nasty enough to where it really doesn't matter how hard he's throwing it, as long as everything remains, miles per hour away from each other. You know what I'm saying?
The movement, exactly. He doesn't have to throw it 98 and 84. He can throw it 93 and 80. But as long as it's moving the way it's moving and the change in speed's the same, he'll still be effective.
And I think that's perfectly reasonable. So he's a guy over the age of 30 that I would definitely sign. Let's talk about Steve Pearce real quick. I'm glad that we have him. I think he's a good depth guy. He's been around, so that's all good, and he seems to have good numbers against lefties, but I don't know if I like him as a cleanup hitter. And, I mean, there's a reason why he's played for a new team every year and why we got him for next to nothing. So, I mean, that's just not a guy who's going to be a long-term number 4 hitter, basically. So, if, like you were saying, David, if you want to go after a bat, I would like to have a 4 through 6 hitter in mind. I don't know who that would be at this point, but someone that has hit in that area for most of his career. And then from there, I still think Pearce has a place in the lineup, especially against lefties. Maybe he plays left and then Bradley, sits those games or whatever. But then you could move maybe Bogarts up to the 4-hole or whatever. I mean, I think he's hitting well enough to justify that. And I don't know. I just hope the plan isn't to leave him there all year long and to put, a lot of our future success on Pearce at this point, because I think we could leave ourselves undergunned these last few months.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like him against righties, but I love him against lefties. And if this lineup that's been doing it all year against righties doesn't mean any help with the playoffs, which it might not, but he was the addition for the lefties. I'm comfortable with it just because he's producing. And he's been producing all year against lefties as well. It wasn't like he just came to Boston and all of a sudden he was, just like, oh, I'm a lefty guy now. He was brought in as a lefty guy. He was doing well as a lefty, versus lefties. This year as well, I think it was close to 300 or over 300, specifically against lefties. So I do feel comfortable in there as right now only against lefties, though. If he was our everyday guy, say Bradley was not on this team right now, and Steve Pearce was playing left field every single day, I would feel like we need another bat off the bench because I'd be like, what are we going to do against righties where this dude's inevitably going to hit 240? But just lefties with Cora as our manager, not John Farrell, I think he's going to manage it well, and I think Pearce is going to continue to just stay consistent, which for him is around 300 against lefties.
Yeah, I just don't know how sustainable it's going to be, and I just would love the the insurance, of a solid bat. And like I said, I mean, who is that at this point?
Well, where are you going to find a number 4 bat in baseball? A number 4 or 5 bat in baseball that's available besides really Moustakas?
Darlin Castro, sign me up. Dozier?
That would be fine, I guess. We're
never getting Castro because Jeter sucks, but I would love Castro. Perfect. But yeah, Dozier would be a guy, but they're going to want too much for him because knowing the Twins, they think they're going to compete next year, which honestly they could. That division sucks, besides Cleveland.
I had them winning the division this year. I bought in. Yeah, I didn't think they were going to lose Santana for basically the whole year. Because
I can't... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that wasn't really known until, late January that he wasn't going to be available.
Yeah, that was wild. I just can't believe, all year I was kind of laughing at Cleveland. They're going to be that team. They're going to be us the last couple of years, score a ton of runs and blow it in the, pitching-wise. For us, it was starters in the playoffs. For them, it's going to be their bullpen. All of a sudden, they go get Brad Hand, and they give up no positional players for him. They're gonna rest Andrew Miller the rest of the year until the postseason. So they could make a run this year. They could re-sign Miller in the offseason because of how good of a deal Hand's on, and they could compete for a World Series again next year and win 100 games. Easy.
They could.
And have a gauntlet of a bullpen.
Yeah, and have an unbelievable bullpen.
That second piece is good, too, Simber. He's got okay numbers, I think, against righties.
Yeah, he's got that funky motion. It's like that submarine, down by his feet, he releases the ball. So he's got that weird angle. You know how that plays on guys, especially in the playoffs, like an O'Day in Baltimore. And, they're looking really scary again. And now it's like, okay, this has to be the most stacked playoff teams in recent history. Right? Houston.
Oh, yeah, easy.
Red Sox, Yankees, and even Seattle, who might win 95 games and be the second wild card.
Usually it's just 2. It's just 2 usually that you're worried about.
It's usually like Red Sox, Yankees, or Houston, New York, or whatever. And this year it's legitimately 4 teams you're worried about.
Right. And any of them can do it.
So can we give San Diego props for getting exactly what they asked for?
Yeah,
for Brad Hand.
They did. They for the longest time. Yeah, you know what?
They're idiots. There's no way that they're getting it. Go out there and get the best catching prospect in baseball.
This could be one of those things where you're like, what did they know? Because if he doesn't pan out, then Cleveland knew something.
They're just comfortable with Gomes at this point.
I think they're just comfortable with the fact. Yeah, they like Gomes, but they're just like, well, Brad Hand can help us win the next 3 years. Our window's 3 years because once
Mejia wasn't going to do that.
Yeah, once Jose Ramirez and Lindor hit free agency, they're going to be signing $200+ million contracts each, on top of other guys on that team that are good. Kluber, Bauer, Clevenger, they're all on sweetheart deals right now. They have one of the best cap management. I think that's what I'm going to go with. Cap management in baseball. If you go look at their contracts on that team, they are unbelievable. And the guys with the big contracts are all ending in a couple of years. Edwin Carcion ends in 2 years, for example. So, nothing to worry about in that team cap-wise. It just depends if Cleveland wants to spend the extra money to be a top 5 team in baseball.
Which they got to be hungry because they're the only thing that city has at this point.
It is, and that's why they're going for it now. That's why they traded away Mejia, however you pronounce his name, for Brad Hand because it helps this year and next year. It helps for the window. And he's not going to be ready during that window. He's going to be ready in when that window closed in 4 or 5 years.